Meredith sat in the bank office, staring at the foreclosure notice. Her name was on a $285,000 0-cents mortgage for a townhouse she had never seen. Her hands trembled. "This must be a mistake," she whispered. But it wasn't. Her husband Brent had forged her signature. That night, she confronted him. He barely looked at her when he said, "I did it for us." Meredith's voice was steady. "You did it for her." A flashback revealed the truth. Brent had used her identity to fund a second life with another woman. Meredith didn't scream. She planned. 2 months later, she stood in a courtroom, testifying calmly as Brent sat red-faced beside his lawyer. When the judge read the charges, identity theft, wire fraud, real estate fraud, Brent was handcuffed. Meredith watched in silence. He stole her name, but not her power. This wasn't just a cheating story. It was a reckoning. And it was hers. Meredith Cole was 41 years old and lived a quiet, structured life in Minneapolis. She worked as a librarian at the Hennepin County Public Library, a job she'd held for nearly a decade. Known for her calm demeanor, warm smile, and passion for literacy, Meredith found joy in routines: early morning tea, long walks with her dog Penny, and weekend tutoring sessions at the community center. People described her as dependable, grounded, and kind. She preferred the quiet certainty of cataloged books to the chaos of life. Her husband, Brent, was the opposite. Flashy, loud, and always looking for the next big opportunity, Brent worked as an automotive sales manager. He had charisma, dressed sharp, and knew how to win people over. When they met, Meredith was captivated by his energy. She liked to think they balanced each other, her steadiness, his drive. They married after 2 years of dating and settled into a modest home on the South Side. Brent had a spotty credit history, missed payments, a car repossession, but Meredith had always been diligent. She handled the finances, paid bills on time, and kept her credit pristine. Brent promised he was working on things. He said his job was stressful and the economy was tough, but they'd be okay. He'd often say, "You're the reason we don't fall apart." She believed him. They tried for children early in their marriage, but after 2 miscarriages, the attempts slowed. Brent didn't want to try IVF, and Meredith, emotionally exhausted, quietly accepted that maybe parenting wasn't in their future. Instead, she poured her heart into her work, her students, and the home they were building together. Over the years, Brent became more distant. He was often working late, attending training events, or out meeting clients. Meredith worried, but chalked it up to stress. She never questioned where he was or who he was with. He was her husband. She had always trusted his words. Brent liked to talk about big dreams, flipping houses, starting a rental business, maybe even buying a lake property someday. Meredith smiled when he talked like that, though she knew they weren't financially there. Still, she let him talk. She thought maybe someday they would be. She didn't notice how often he asked for her social security number, how he slipped papers in front of her to sign, usually while she was distracted. Watching TV, cooking dinner. "Just refinancing the car," he'd say, or "need this to fix my credit." She signed. She trusted. When he told her he'd opened a joint investment account to prepare for retirement, she felt proud. He was finally thinking long-term. She had no reason to suspect the truth, that those documents weren't about cars or investments. They were for a mortgage, for a property she'd never see, for a woman she didn't know existed, and for a betrayal that would nearly destroy her, until she decided to fight back. Meredith had always been the calm in the storm, but soon, she'd become the storm itself. It began with little things, subtle changes that, at first, Meredith didn't question. Brent started spending more time at auto auctions, events she'd never known him to attend regularly before. He'd disappear for weekends, with vague explanations like networking or helping a friend flip a car. When she asked for details, he'd wave her off with a grin and say, "You wouldn't find it interesting." He also developed a sudden interest in designer clothes, fitted jackets, Italian shoes, new watches. Meredith found the price tags tucked into their bathroom trash and felt a pang of confusion. Brent's salary hadn't increased. If anything, sales had slowed at his dealership. When she asked how they could afford it, he claimed he's somewhere warm. Meredith wanted to believe him. She clung to the idea that maybe, after everything, the stress, the heartbreak, the fertility struggles, he was finally making an effort to reconnect. But the cracks were forming. She noticed he paid for everything in cash now. His wallet bulged with bills, but their joint account better moved. He stopped letting her see the mail, said he was. Then one afternoon at the library, a woman approached the front desk, mid-30s, well-dressed, with bright red lipstick and oversized sunglasses. She asked for Brent by name. Meredith's stomach sank. "He's not here," she said slowly. The woman blinked, confused. "But he said this was his wife's office." The woman mixed pity at that, mumbling something about being a client, but Meredith couldn't shake the look in her eyes. Confusion mixed with pity. That night, Meredith brought it up. Brent laughed. "She's a buyer. I'm helping find a car. I told her you worked at the library. Don't be weird about it." He made it sound like she was paranoid, sensitive. Meredith dropped it, but she didn't forget. A week later, a letter arrived in the mail, addressed to her, from a mortgage lender. It was a pre-approval notice for a refinance on a property she didn't recognize. The address was in a suburb she'd never visited. Her heart pounded as she read the figures. $285,000, 0 cents, approved under her name, tied to her social security number. She brought it to Brent. He barely glanced at it. "Junk mail," he muttered, tossing it aside. "That stuff's never accurate." But Meredith knew something was wrong. She began sorting through the drawers where he kept paperwork. Several folders were missing. The filing cabinet's lock was changed. Her instincts screamed. That letter wasn't junk mail. It was a signal, one she couldn't ignore. Brent hadn't just grown distant. He hadn't just stopped loving her. He'd crossed a line that shattered everything. The house, the life, the marriage. They were all illusions now. But she didn't know yet was just how deep the betrayal went, or how much of her future he'd already sold out from under her. But she was about to find out. And once she did, she would never be the same. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Meredith was shelving a new delivery of books when her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She answered out of habit, expecting it to be a patron, or maybe a reminder call from the doctor's office. But instead, a brisk voice asked her to verify her identity, then launched into a script about missed mortgage payments. Meredith blinked, confused. "I don't have a mortgage outside of my home," she said. The woman on the other end read off the property address. Meredith had never heard of it. A sick feeling crawled up her spine. The loan was under her name, her social security number. She asked for the paperwork to be emailed immediately. When she opened the documents later that night, her heart dropped. There it was, her signature, forged on a second mortgage for $285,000, 0 cents. The property listed, a modern 2-bedroom townhouse in a trendy part of town. She felt like the wind had been knocked out of her. She went straight to Brent. The moment she stepped through the front door, her hands were shaking. He was lounging on the couch, flipping through TV channels like nothing was wrong. Meredith threw the papers on the coffee table. "What is this?" Brent barely glanced at them. "It's not a big deal," he said flatly. "Just a smart investment. I was going to tell you." Meredith's voice trembled. "Using my name? My credit?" Aunt sighed, like she was overreacting. "It's in both our best interests. You've got great credit and no ambition to do anything with it. I figured, why not use it to build something real?" "Something real?" she snapped. "You bought a home with my name, behind my back, and you've been living there with someone else." Brent's eyes narrowed. "You were always too cautious, Meredith. Always holding me back. Do you have any idea how boring you've become? Always reading, always playing it safe. I needed more." Meredith didn't yell. She didn't scream or fall apart. Instead, she stood in the silence, listening to the last illusions of her marriage crumble under his cruelty. Then she turned around and walked upstairs. She sat on the edge of their bed and pulled out her laptop. Nerd still shook, but her mind was clear now. No more disbelief, no more denial. She searched for legal aid services in Minneapolis. She filled out an online form with a brief description: identity theft, fraudulent mortgage, marital deception. Within minutes, she got an auto ready. "Thank you. A legal advisor will contact you within 48 hours. That night, Meredith didn't cry. Instead, she opened a spreadsheet and began entering every known transaction she and Brent had made over the last year. She pulled credit reports, copied bank statements, and created folders on her desktop titled Evidence, Timeline, and Deception. If Brent thought he could destroy her quietly, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. Meredith wasn't a victim. Not anymore. She was building a case, and she wouldn't stop until the truth was exposed. Meredith wasted no time. The next morning, she contacted the nonprofit women's legal group listed in the legal aid directory. Within a day, they assigned her to a pro bono attorney and connected her with a forensic accountant named Leah Sanders, who specialized in financial abuse and spousal fraud. Meredith met with her over Zoom and laid everything out: her identity stolen, the second mortgage, the townhouse, and the unfamiliar SUV she had spotted once outside the library, now suspiciously familiar. Leah's team dug deep. What they uncovered was worse than Meredith had feared. Brent hadn't just taken out a second mortgage. He had rerouted funds from their joint savings into a business bank account under an LLC named Cole Partners, which he had registered using Meredith's name and tax ID without her knowledge. From that LLC, he funneled money to lease the townhouse, pay private school application fees for Nicole's son, and purchase a luxury SUV. The vehicle? A white BMW X5, registered under Nicole Barnes, financed entirely by a line of credit opened under Meredith's identity. Leah documented everything with timestamps, wire trails, and notarized comparisons of Meredith's true signature versus the forgeries. The evidence was undeniable. Brent hadn't made a mistake. He had orchestrated a calculated financial betrayal that left Meredith legally and financially exposed. Meredith filed for legal separation that Friday, quietly, deliberately. Her lawyer filed motions to freeze all shared bank accounts and freeze the LLC's assets. A hold was placed on the townhouse deed, pending fraud investigation. Brent was never notified. Yet. Meredith wanted to see how he moved when he still thought she was clueless. She moved in with her cousin Rachel in St. Paul, transferring only her essential personal items and documents. Rachel worked in cybersecurity and helped Meredith secure her phone, set up encrypted backups, and log every text and call from Brent moving forward. They created a private Google Drive to house all files, emails, legal notices, call recordings, and the forged financial statements Leah had flagged. Brent, still unaware that the walls were closing in, began texting again. "I miss you, we can talk this out," Meredith replied with calm neutrality. "Let's speak later." He slipped quickly into admitting he used her name to keep us afloat, that Nicole needed help too, and that you weren't doing anything with the money anyway. Meredith never interrupted. She let him talk. Every word would serve as evidence. But when Brent realized the accounts had been frozen, he snapped. One voicemail came through just after midnight, his voice raised, frantic, accusatory. "You think you can just disappear and take everything? I'll make you pay for this." That was the moment Meredith forwarded everything to her attorney and asked her to file for a temporary restraining order. The judge approved it within 36 hours. She changed her number. She updated her passwords. She started going to therapy once a week. Her life, once built on quiet routines and trust, was now armored in evidence, legal protection, and a growing sense of clarity. Brent had stolen her signature, her identity, and her trust, but what he couldn't take was her will to fight. And while he moved blindly, convinced she was broken and alone, Meredith was building her case, one forged document, one voice recording, one strategic move at a time. She was done being the woman behind the curtain, the woman in the shadows. Meredith Cole was coming for justice, and this time, Brent wouldn't even see it coming. Meredith took a deep breath as she signed the final set of documents. Her attorney, Nora Jensen, had prepared every detail flawlessly. The case file for identity theft, wire fraud, and property misrepresentation was complete, neatly bound, meticulously evidenced, and headed straight to the district attorney's office. The moment it was filed, Nora looked up and said, "It begins now." And it did. The next morning, Brent strutted into the dealership, wearing his signature aviator sunglasses and designer loafers, completely unaware. As he stepped onto the showroom floor, a process server approached with quiet precision, handed him the envelope and said, "You've been served." Brent's smirk vanished. His colleagues looked on, stunned. He opened the documents and paled. The words "criminal complaint" were stamped in bold across the top. That moment was Meredith's first real breath of freedom. The court granted an emergency injunction within 48 hours. All financial accounts associated with the fraudulent LLC were frozen. The title on the townhouse was locked, and a lien was placed on the vehicle Nicole drove. Within a week, a tow truck arrived outside Nicole's apartment and hauled the white Benny W away. She came outside yelling, barefoot in a robe, but the tow driver had orders. Brent tried to call Meredith. She didn't answer. He sent an email with the subject line, "Let's talk." Nora printed it and submitted it as part of the harassment record. The court date came quickly. Meredith arrived dressed professionally, calm and prepared. When called to testify, she walked to the stand and faced Brent for the first time since everything unraveled. He looked disheveled. No smug expression, no charm, just panic behind tired eyes. Meredith didn't speak with rage. She presented the fact point, backed with documentation. Her stolen signature on mortgage papers, the LLC registration, the cash transfers, and Brent's voice on a recorded call, admitting to using her information because your credit was clean, and I needed to make moves. The courtroom was silent as the judge reviewed the evidence. Brent's defense attorney tried to spin a misunderstanding between spouses, a shared financial misstep, but the facts were irrefutable. The ruling was swift. Meredith was granted full ownership of their primary residence. Her name was cleared from the fraudulent mortgage. Her credit file would be restored for court order. Brent was sentenced to pay $142,000, 0 cents in restitution, including the value of the stolen SUV, court fees, and damages for identity theft. His automotive sales license was suspended indefinitely, pending review, and the judge issued a stern warning. You abuse the trust of your spouse and the financial system that relies on good faith. You'll answer for both. As the verdict was read, Brent collapsed into his chair. Nicole never showed up. A week later, Meredith learned she had left town. Quietly, without forwarding information. With the legal victory behind her, Meredith did something she hadn't done in years. She wrote. She submitted a guest column to the local newspaper titled, "How I Lost My Husband, but Gained My Credit Back." In it, she outlined not just what Brent had done, but how many women face financial betrayal hidden behind marriages, partnerships, and polished facades. She shared resources, steps to protect your identity, and most importantly, the emotional toll of discovering that love had been used as a smokescreen for theft. The column went viral locally. Messages poured in from women who had faced similar betrayals. Meredith answered each one with empathy and encouragement. Her quiet story had become a rallying cry. Brent, meanwhile, was drowning in legal fees, frozen assets, and a professional reputation ruined beyond repair. He moved in with his brother out in Eden Prairie, unable to secure housing under his own name. The man who once walked through dealership lots like a king was now dependent on public transit and avoided local headlines like the plague. And Meredith? She was just getting started. She had turned her heartbreak into a case study, her silence into strength, and her financial ruin into a blueprint for justice. Her revenge hadn't come with screaming or sabotage. It came with receipts, resilience, and the power of truth backed by law. Meredith didn't just recover. She rose, After the court case closed and Brent faded into legal obscurity, Meredith redirected the rage and grief into something meaningful. She connected with a local nonprofit that supported women recovering from financial abuse, offering to share her story. What began as a one-time speaking event turned into a series of workshops, where she taught women how to monitor their credit, recognize signs of identity theft, and establish financial boundaries in relationships. Her sessions filled up quickly, and the waiting list grew. Women wanted more than healing. They wanted armor. With encouragement from Nora, her attorney, and support from the nonprofit, Meredith wrote a guidebook. She titled it Signed Without Consent. The book blended her personal experience with practical advice, sample affidavits, credit report templates, and how to protect yourself when trust is broken. It was raw, informative, and unapologetically empowering. Independent bookstores across Minneapolis began stocking it, and within 3 months, it became a local bestseller. Her credit score, once wrecked by Brent's lies, began to climb. Each point regained felt like a piece of her identity being restored. Her bank approved her for a new card, one she didn't need, but applied for just to know she could. She paid it off every month, not because she was afraid, but because she was Freeman's freedom. She was choice. With her restitution check in hand and her savings intact, Meredith booked a trip she had once only dreamed of: Scotland. Her grandmother had been born there, and Meredith always imagined herself walking along the moors, standing beside ancient castles, and reading poetry by a window with a view of the sea. She spent 10 days exploring stone ruins, sipping tea in quiet villages, and taking long, solitary walks where no one knew her name. And she loved every second of it. Returning home, she didn't feel empty. She felt expanded. She'd survived betrayal, theft, humiliation, and turned it all into resilience. Her next step was deliberate. She found a small lakeside cottage about an hour outside the city. It was peaceful, modest, and perfect. No mortgage, no shared names on the deed, just hers. Every item inside the home had been purchased with cash: the couch, the cookware, the framed photos she'd printed from her Scotland trip. No lies, no secrets, no debt. She hung a small plaque by her front door that read, "Paid in full." It wasn't about the money. It was about the truth. Every inch of that space was her own. No one had stolen it. No one had faked a signature to get it. No one but Meredith had the keys. Dating came quietly. She wasn't in a rush. When she did go on dates, she paid her own way. She never hid her story. If anything, she spoke it plainly. "If that scares you, you're not for me," she once told a man who flinched at the mention of court documents. She didn't need someone to rescue her. She was already safe. On Saturday mornings, she'd brew coffee, sit by her lake-facing window, and write letters to women who reached out after reading her book. Some were in the middle of battles, others were just beginning. She answered each one with the same message: "You are not crazy. You are not alone. And you are not done." Meredith's life was no longer about what she lost. It was about what she rebuilt, with intention, strength, and no apologies. On the 1-year anniversary of the foreclosure call that changed her life, Meredith sat quietly on the porch of her lakeside home. The late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting soft shadows across her journal. A cup of chamomile tea rested beside her, steaming gently. She didn't feel broken. She didn't feel bitter. She felt grounded. Meredith opened her journal to a fresh page, the same leather-bound one she had started the night she discovered Brent's betrayal. But this entry was different. She wasn't writing through pain or confusion. She was writing from a place of clarity. She titled the page, "1 Year Later." Her pen moved steadily across the paper as she wrote about peace, growth, and what it meant to reclaim her name, not just legally, but emotionally. She reflected on the strength it took to press charges, to testify, and to face the man who tried to ruin her. Inside her home, in a drawer of her filing cabinet, was a folder labeled "Proof I Survived." Inside it was the original foreclosure notice, printed emails, and the court judgment in her favor. She didn't look at it often, but she never threw it away. It was about remembering that she overcame it. That morning, she'd met with her accountant, something she once would have left to Brent. Together, they structured a small scholarship fund under her name. It would provide emergency financial assistance to women escaping economic abuse. No press release, no big announcement, just quiet action. The way Meredith always moved, deliberate and strong. She named the fund New Pages, a nod to her life in libraries and journals, and to the fresh starts she believed every woman deserved. The first $5,000, 0 cents deposit, came directly from the advance on her second book. She didn't need applause, she needed purpose, and she had found it. As the sun dipped lower, Meredith closed her journal. She placed a hand on the page, lingering over her last sentence of the day. "He forged my name to break me. I reclaimed it to rebuild me." She said the words out loud, softly, like a promise spoken to the air. Her voice didn't tremble. She stood up and walked to the edge of the lake, watching the water ripple against the stones. This had once felt like the edge of her life. Now, it felt like the beginning. There were still scars, moments that stung when she least expected it. But they no longer defined her. Meredith smiled, not because life had returned to what it was, but because she had built something better. Not despite what happened, but because of it. Her power wasn't in the revenge. It was in the aftermath, in choosing not to disappear, in staying visible, in rewriting her story line by line with her own hand. She went inside, the journal tucked under her arm, the words still fresh on the page, and the future wide open. He forged my signature, but he didn't forge my strength. He tried to erase me from the life I built, line by line, dollar by dollar. But the truth has a way of resurfacing, even when it's buried under lies and legal debt. He stole my name, but I kept my voice. My name is Meredith Cole, and this isn't a story of identity theft. It's the truth reclaiming its power. I didn't just survive, I rebuilt. I used his crimes to create change. I used the silence he thought would protect him to expose him. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who thought your silence was a weapon, they forgot one thing. Silence breaks, and when it does, it speaks louder than lies. To every woman who's been manipulated, dismissed, or financially trapped, you are not powerless. You are not alone. Your story matters. Your name is yours. Reclaim it. Subscribe to Veiled Fury for more stories of betrayal shattered and justice reclaimed. Every week, we tell the stories they thought would stay buried. We speak the names they tried to silence, and we honor the women who chose truth over fear. Because sometimes the strongest voice is the one they never saw coming.